job, to internship, to job, to job, to job, to job, to job, to blog, to job. It's been pretty special. So to be right here with you is something that I really want to take advantage of and speak to you on a personal level, because I've been where you are not so long ago. So here goes. Now I'm going to build my cover and be a little honest. I barely knew what journalism was when I was your age, when I was in high school. In almost every job interview I go to, or I've been to, I wear my fancy suit and I have my resume and my business card, and they always ask me the same question that I'm never prepared to answer. When did you know you wanted to be a journalist? I never can give them the right answer, I feel like. I think they want to hear something like, I was filling out the New York Times crossword puzzle when I was 8. Or, I used to stage hunger strikes until my parents let me stay up late and watch Dateline. The truth is, my heroes were Harry Potter and Scarlett O'Hara, Gone with the Wind, and I used to rush home to watch Oprah, not CNN, every day after school. And until I was 17, I was pretty sure I was going to be an astronaut. But I do know this. Stories were my life. I could outline a novel in my head in the half hour it took for the school bus to cart me from door to door. And I never told my mom this, but I used to relish those weekends when I'd be punished for something or the other and put on house arrest. Fine, I thought. Slam my door, I've got my books and I've got my words and I'm going to write for hours, and I did. In high school, I changed schools no less than 3 times. I was like this drifter. I was this nomad child who never really felt like 100% I belonged anywhere, no matter how quickly I learned to make friends. And it wasn't until the 11th grade that I actually started working at a school newspaper. I can't recall that much about it, except for my editor. She was this tyrannical 12th grader, and she would follow me from class. She scared the crap out of me for one thing. She'd follow me from class to class if I didn't turn in my story, on lunchroom or something like that, on deadline. And I said to myself, well, if that's journalism, then no thank you, I'm not going to be in that business. But I did know another thing. Whenever I would go home and I'd flip through the stacks of magazines, the teen magazines that were piling up on my bedroom floor, I would close the last page on each issue and I felt a little bit sadder about life, about myself. I'd be thinking about 5 ways to lose 10 pounds by spring break, or how to make my boy crush like me. And I used to get, I just would get so angry, I would get so upset that I decided that I was going to get into the magazine business and I was going to fix it. I didn't know how, but I was going to fix this mess, and so no girl would be upset when she read magazines anymore. Little did I know, life had a few other plans in mind. When I got into UGA, my mission was pretty clear. I had to get into grading. There was no question. I heard it was the best out there, and so I wanted to be among the best. I remember getting this really crazy buzz when I walked into my first real journalism lecture. I think we talked about a scandal at the Food Lion grocery store for maybe an hour, but I didn't care. It seemed ridiculous, but I was in. That was it for me. But I'm going to be honest, though. I can't talk about the lessons I learned at UGA without mentioning the Red and Black. That's where I got my real education, was up the street on Baxter with Ed and Carolyn sitting right there. Learning how to be a journalist in real time. And I'd hike up that hill every day, sweating with my backpack, and it was where I wanted to be. I was there till midnight every night working on stories with other kids who were just as much as I am. I know you guys probably feel the same way about your friends at the newspaper. They get you. We wanted to get our message out there no matter what it was. One of my favorite professors, he would call us ink-stained wretches. And it sounds ridiculous, but my laptop was literally stained black from how often I was handling newspapers all the time. And with that ink, for the first time in our lives, we had real power. I remember when my first front page story came out. It was on summer orientation or something really silly. But when I went to the newsstand and I picked it up and held it in my hand, and it was my name, it was my words, and people were going to read them, and maybe read them, I didn't know, but it was there. And that was really powerful for me. And between the Red and Black and Grady, college was this playground. I'd been to all these different high schools, never really felt like I belonged to them yet. In college, I found that I could do whatever I wanted. I was like a playground for me. I was bouncing from internship to internship. I was like a little kid with too many toys. But it didn't take too long before I realized that other kids wanted to play with those toys too. When you get started in the business, you'll quickly realize just how competitive it is, and how stiff the competition can be. You'll see your friends get gigs at the AJC or the Associated Press, or internship in New York, and you'll think, well, that's it. I suck. I'm going to go to law school instead. And turned down for a summer internship with the AJC, and I won't say who beat me to it, but she might have been the editor of the Red and Black, I'm not sure. In my freshman year, I decided to go a whole other route. I traveled to Argentina with a group of friends. I was 18, my first time really going on my own little trip over, out of the country. There wasn't really a journalism type for me. There was no internship. It was just a chance to get out there and see some of the world that I was so excited to write about one day. And in the 2 months that I spent there, I realized for the first time I didn't have to follow any cookie-cutter path to success in journalism. I had this idea stuck in my head that there was a certain order to achieving success. And all I've been really doing the whole time was sabotaging myself by listening to others and looking at what they were doing. So I came back home, and I just put these blinders on. I decided I was going to follow my gut for the first time and just do what I felt was right. Wherever it led me, if it didn't point me to a newsroom, then oh well, I learned to trust it anyway. Here's where my gut led me. I pulled myself out of the running to be news editor at the Red and Black in my senior year. Basically, the one goal I've been working toward for the past 2 years. Instead, I commuted 3 days a week to Atlanta to cover the state legislature for a teeny-tiny newswire service called Morris News. And it was there that I met Greg. He was a star of the making at the Red and Black and at the Associated Press, rather. And when I was talking to Greg about, wanting to travel after college, and could I travel, and who does that, and is it possible, and what about money? And he was, he said, I have this friend, and he had his internship in Santiago, and it was super grassroots, and he had a great time, and I'll give you his email. I ended up shooting the editor an email. Could I possibly come to Santiago for free? And he was quick to respond. His name was Steve. He said in his email, hey Mandy, if you're crazy in all caps, enough to move to the other end of the world and work for free, we're happy to have you. So that was it. I booked my ticket a month later, a month before graduation, and started saving every last cent that I possibly could. And then I got another email about a couple weeks after that from a local newspaper in Georgia, and they were offering me a job for a reporter. What I had gone to school for, basically. But you have to remember, this was 2009. I mean, it was in the thick of the recession. The country was on its knees. Newsrooms were laying off people left and right. You didn't turn down the job when they offered you one, especially, in my graduating class. But I had this crazy tug, I couldn't say no, and I listened to my gut again. I followed it south, way, way south. Packed my bags, moved to Chile to work for free at a news site I knew nothing about and in a country I could barely point out on a map. The lessons that I learned over the next 6 months, I'm not exaggerating when I say I carry them with me every single day. I wish I had enough time to share them with you. I'm sure you guys don't, because you want this to go quickly, but for the first time in 4 years, I was free. I don't want to be corny, but it's that sense when you have no schedules, you have no professors, you have no bells ringing, or periods, or teachers, no parents, no rules that can rope you in throughout your life. It was the kind of freedom I could taste when I woke up each morning and watched the sunrise over the city that I fell in love with within the first couple of days. It was knowing each day was my own choice, my own chance to do whatever I wanted. I really learned in Chile, not just the language or how to be a reporter, which I did, or how to cook empanadas. I learned to trust myself. I learned that life was more than just fill-in-the-blank pages that you skip through like forms at the dentist. I learned how to deal with roommates who had no idea what I was saying half the time. I learned how to hitchhike, how to earthquake-proof my bedroom, how many rights I had taken for granted as a young woman growing up in the U.S. I learned to tell stories in another language, sometimes the wrong language. And that all I had to do was show others that I was interested in what they had to say, and they would pour their souls out to me for little more than the price of a cup of coffee. And I learned about myself at the same time. I'm telling you, you think you know who you are when you're 17, 18, 19, you really do, you know who you are. But just wait until you throw yourself out there and you have to make something of yourself in the world. That's when you really see, when you land on your feet, who you really are and what you're really made of. And what I found at the end of that time was someone that I actually liked. And when you realize you like yourself, that's something that no one can ever take away from you. And she didn't always say the right things or know all the answers, and she never did learn to roll her R's like a true Spanish speaker. And she wasn't at the New York Times at age 20, but she was brave, and she took chances. She made mistakes, and she found ways to laugh about them and write about them and let others laugh about them. And at the end of 5 months, when I spent my last peso on a cab ride to the airport in Peru, and I was ready to return to the States, I could look back on the half dozen journals that I had written during that time, and I knew that I was that girl, that she was all I ever needed to be. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I trusted her to lead me again in the right direction. Now, the series of events that happened next can all be traced back to one place, and that's here in Athens at Grady. A couple of those men over there. They were the ones who helped me fill out the application that got me the internship in 2008 when I was just a junior at Reader's Digest in New York. It seemed like such a little thing, an internship, but I knew I wanted it. And from that internship, it would turn out to be the most important step I've ever taken in my career. And I'll tell you how. So 2 years later, I'm back from Chile. I'm triumphant. I'm this new woman. I have all these great lessons and all these things. I also have no job and no car. $16 in the bank account, if that. And I wound up taking the exact same job I actually turned down before I went to Chile. So I didn't really have a choice, and it was there, and I was there, But I felt like a huge step backward, and I'm sure you all experience that sometime when you have to go back to move forward. It was like the last 6 months hadn't even happened. And then, on my first day of work, I got an email. It was from one of my old coworkers at Reader's Digest, where I interned, a year before. And they were looking for a new associate editor. And did I want to apply? And you can pretty much imagine what happened. A month later, I was in New York. Ran out of here as fast as I could. And it was the exact same industry I'd always wanted to be in magazines. I was going to change things. It wasn't the magazine I thought I'd be at, but I was on the right track. And I'd taken a really winding road to get there. And then, I moved into New York. I got a mattress. When you buy your first mattress, you're broken. That is the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life, and the warranty and all that kind of stuff. It was nuts. I got my first mattress. I got my desk on Craigslist, moved into my new apartment with my roommates. I was in New York. I was going to be like Sex and the City, minus the really expensive shoes because I was starting out. And then I think it was like maybe 2.5 weeks later, I got called into my editor's office with a few of my coworkers, and we all kind of huddled together, and we knew Reader's Digest had a couple of problems, bumps of its own down the road. And they sat us down, and one by one, they told us they were letting us go. They were cutting, I think, 2,000 employees worldwide, 10% of their staff. And the next day, I packed up my little box, my cute little cubicle sign said Amanda Woodruff on it, and I went home to New York, where I had no family. It's kind of like square one all over. But it was a bump in the road, and that's just the nature of the business. I didn't dwell on it. Everyone always asked me, "Are you okay? What are you going to do? Are you going to go back home to Georgia?" And I guess I could have. I had a beautiful family. I had great friends. It was what I knew. But I also knew that the journalism industry was always going to evolve, and if I was going to cut up and run the minute that it started to hurt a little bit, then I really wasn't ready for it. So I listened to my gut again. I stayed in New York. I was counting the last pennies of my savings account, and I had no job prospects right away, but I just knew I had to be there. That's where I needed to be. Just something told me that. So I ended up taking a job at this online news site. That was not the best experience ever. I was writing about court systems and reading legal documents 10 hours a day. It was not super exciting. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I wasn't loving it. But I stuck in it, and I did other things. I started my blog. That blog is what saved me. And that's what I'm talking about when I say, whatever it is that you think makes you a little bit different, a little bit special, that's going to set you apart, you got to grab onto it. And I knew I liked to cycle, but I never thought that I could use that to propel my career in any kind of way. But while I was laid off, I started this blog, and I started finding other people who writing about cycling, this little niche. And when I went on job interviews, people love that. They want to see that you're writing even though you're not, working. And it became this kind of talisman I can carry with me. And it kept me sane while I was going through hell at that job. And I'm so grateful for it. And after about 15 months, I got another little email. Emails have been really big in my life. From another girl that I knew at Reader's Digest when I was interning there, and it must have been 4 years at that time. And she was an assistant, and I was the intern, and we barely talked, but she'd seen some posts I wrote on Facebook, and she wanted to know if I'd be interested in talking to her at Business Insider about starting there as a reporter, writing personal finance, which wasn't, obviously, from listening, I wasn't that great at finance. but I had learned a lot, and I was so excited to have the chance to jump into an online, daily, digital, all online news site, which is a huge part of what the industry has become. And so, of course, I started that process, and that was 7 months ago, and I got the job, and it has been one of the happiest times. When you find something you finally love doing, I can't describe it. Since I've been both ways, I've had the horrible time and I've had the good times. I really, really am trying to relish the good times now that I've had in New York, and I get to go into work every day and write stories that I care about. And if I don't care about them, then I find a way to make them interesting for people I used to care about. And I've learned a ton, and I paid off my credit card, which was probably just as exciting as getting a new job. It's great, and I always knew I'd wind up in this business somehow. But if there's the one thing that I'm proud of, the one thing that I can always hold that I know, is that I got here on my own terms and no one else's. There's no one else's blueprint. Just by being here today, in high school, you guys are doing way more than I was when I was 17. I couldn't have told you who Christiane before was. I'm sure you guys all know. And you're showing you're not afraid to take the same risks that I did, in your own way, not the way that I did. And you all have a lot to be proud of. Have a look at that table over there, and the production that we see. And to be invited here to speak at Grady by the very people who helped me fill out that internship application, that would somehow lead me to every step of my career so far, is one of the coolest opportunities and honors that I could ask for. So thank you for that. And maybe you guys won't all end up here at Grady or even in journalism at all, a couple of years down the road. But the point is that wherever you go, you put those blinders on. Put them on tight and follow your gut. I'm still on a journey of my own, but it hasn't failed me yet. So I just want to say thank you again for having me, and good luck.
Thanks so much, Mandi.